There's a process many of us wish that God will just skip entirely. It's those processes that are long, uncomfortable, and we sometimes don't see the end of it. But I'm here to tell you that that process is actually a sign of God's deep love and care for you. It might seem contradictory because you're thinking, where is God in this whole time? Where is God in this situation? Where is God in this process? But He is there. Just stay with me. We're getting somewhere, and I'll show you why the process is actually a sign of God's love. Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're returning, I'm so glad to have you here, and I'm so grateful that you will come back and tune in with me. But if this is your first time seeing me on your screen, welcome to this safe space. My name is Shide. I create videos on faith, lifestyle, and everything in between. Just see this space as a safe place where we have honest conversations and we walk through the Christian journey, Christian faith, just thinking about those things that actually make us better and understanding that Jesus came to die for us, give us abundant life and a life full of joy and fullness of His love. But if you're not Christian, I also want to welcome you to this space because a lot of the things that we discuss is applicable to every human being. The difference here is that obviously Jesus is our hope, and I hope that you will get to know Him. I pray that you will get to know Him as well. But there are many things that you can take here that are also useful for you. So today we're going to be talking about process. This is something I've had to learn to love. Well, I would say love, but I've had to learn to come to terms with, because in everyone's journey, in everyone's life, we are always going to go through process. And I'll give you an example of how I used to really struggle with process or struggle with waiting. When I'm watching a movie or watching a show, I would skip the parts where I felt like, oh, there's too much suspense. I just want to get to the end. And when I was younger, I used to try and read books from the back. So I read the back, see how it ends, and then go back to start reading from the beginning of the story or of the novel. So that's just an example to show you that I'm someone who never really enjoyed the process. And I've now come to a place where I'm actually, I would say, enjoying it. And the reason why I'll say I'm enjoying it is because I now see the goodness of God through the process. And that took me time. That took a lot of healing. That took a lot of studying the word. And that took a lot of coming to know who God really is, to understand His character. And when I know why He's taking me through a process, I'm like, okay, God, I surrender. And there's a beauty that comes when you surrender. There's a peace that comes when you surrender. And there's an ability to actually just go through the process with joy. But that only comes through His grace. So before I run away with this topic, let's actually go into what we're going to be discussing today. And we're using Joseph. Like, Joseph is probably one of the best examples ever in the Bible, in all of history, of someone who went through process. And when I first came across Joseph's story in Sunday school, in being in like my younger age, I was like, why did he have to go through this? But now in my 30s, especially at the age where Joseph had come into prominence, I'm like, I understand. And there's a lot of things I've gone through in life that I'm like, okay, I see why I needed to go through that process. And now I can relate to Joseph and I see why he had to go through the process as well. Joseph's calling was always supposed to be in leadership. From when we're introduced to Joseph, the dreamer, in Genesis 37, we see the dream that he had and what he shared with his brothers and how his brothers got upset, upset with his dream, thinking he was arrogant, thinking like, who do you think you are that we're going to be bowing down to you? But we're introduced to who Joseph is actually called to be. However, we go through a whole process from Genesis 37 and then skip into Genesis 39, where we're introduced again to Joseph and what has happened over time when his brother sold him into slavery and how he journeyed into Egypt, which is actually where God needed him to be. And so when we go through the process of Joseph's life, we see when he had the dream, his brothers get very angry with him and then they throw him in a pit. They actually wanted to kill him, but one of his brothers stands up for him and says, no, let's not kill him. I mean, in the hopes that he would go back and rescue him. But by the time he gets there, his other brothers have sold Joseph into slavery. And so these people buy Joseph and they take him into Egypt. I can't even imagine what that process would have been like, but I can see that it would have been so painful, especially walking through the betrayal of his brothers, selling him to Egypt or to strangers. So now Joseph is in Egypt and he's sold into Potiphar's house. And we meet again this Joseph that has grown up a little bit. He's in Potiphar's house. He's now working and he's actually very favored by God. God is with him. Even Potiphar knows that God is with Joseph. And everything that was happening in Potiphar's house, his master, Joseph's master, was prospering. And Potiphar knew that he was prospering because of Joseph. And I want to pause there and walk you through why this particular part of this story is very important. Because when we go through processes in our life, and I'm sure when you look through the processes you've been through, you're like, where was God in all of this? And I think it's very, very, very interesting and also comforting that God will ensure that we see that his hand was on Joseph in Potiphar's house. So though Joseph was not in the place that he would have liked to be in, we see that he was not left alone because God made sure that while Joseph was in Potiphar's house, he was favored. He made sure that he stood out amongst the rest of all the other servants and made Joseph even the house master. He was the one who was head, like basically chief butler, basically like the chief manager of the house. And Potiphar trusted him. But it doesn't stop there. And I'm like, God, why did this have to happen? But we'll see when we get towards the end. So now, Potiphar's wife, obviously, Joseph is probably very handsome. And then he's so favored. He's so diligent in his work. God's hand is on him. You know, when God's hand is on you, sometimes we attract the wrong people as well. Sad, but that's why God gives us discernment. So now Joseph is being tempted by Potiphar's wife. Potiphar's wife is trying to lure him into sleeping with her. And Joseph, being a man of God, being one who obeys God, says no. And he runs away from her, but he leaves his coats behind. And while he leaves his coats behind, Potiphar's wife plots another betrayal, sadly, and then screams and shouts and says he tried to rape her, which is so sad because, again, this is someone who was called into leadership and he was already even leading in some capacity in Potiphar's house, and out of no fault of his was now being accused of rape. And because of that, ends up in prison. So now Joseph is in prison, and in Genesis 39, verse 21, and I'm just going to read what it says. It says, "But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy, and he gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison." I think what is important to point out here again is that even in the process that seems painful, not even seems, is painful and uncomfortable, that God is favoring Joseph. So for you as well, even in the process that seems very uncomfortable or is uncomfortable and is painful, God is with you. God is protecting you. God is keeping you. God is favoring you just the same way he favored Joseph even in the prison. And when I was pondering and thinking about Joseph's story and just thinking, why did he have to be sold by his brothers into slavery? Why did he end up in Potiphar's house, and where he was doing very well now ends up in prison? It's like it just keeps getting worse and worse. But I think about it from the point where his brother sold him into slavery. If his brothers never sold him to the Ishmaelites who now brought him to Egypt, his calling as a leader would never have been fulfilled because God had called him a leader, a prime minister in Egypt, but he had to find a way to get there. So I'm like, okay, that's the first process. But now he's in Potiphar's house. He's doing well. Couldn't have been any other way for him getting to become this leader in Egypt. But I think what is so powerful in the story of Potiphar and Joseph is that when Joseph was doing so well in Potiphar's house and Potiphar's wife saw him as an object of her desire, I feel like if that had not happened, Joseph would have gotten so comfortable as being head of staff or chief of staff in Potiphar's house when God had a greater destiny for him. So for you, God has a great destiny for you, and he never wants us to settle for less or manage wherever we are. He's actually taking us to greater heights, the same way he was taking Joseph to a greater calling, to fulfill that calling that he always had for him. But he had to make sure that Joseph did not get comfortable in being in Potiphar's house. In addition to God taking us through this process to actually get us to our full destiny, to fulfill that destiny, he also uses the process to form us. And so character is formed in process. Our faith is built in process. Our ability to become who he has called us to be is forged in the process. And we see that with Joseph. Joseph was someone who wasn't very discerning when he was sharing his dream with his brothers. And some people say maybe a bit arrogant. But through the process, we see how he's built humility, how his faith has increased in God. And even when he faced Potiphar's wife, which he could have easily have just given into, because of the character formation he had been through in the process, he said no, even when it was easy for him to say yes. And so you're going through the process and thinking, okay, what exactly is this supposed to lead to? And I would say and encourage you that in this time, just think, God, how are you character forming? Like, what exactly are you doing in my life right now to form me, to make me better, to make me stronger, to make me more resilient, and to make me someone who will come out through on the other end better than when I first started in the process? And I just want to take this time to pause and say that where you feel you have been betrayed, or where you actually have been betrayed or deceived, God is calling you to trust Him again. God is calling you to submit and surrender that pain, because when people had come and betrayed you or deceived you and they thought that they were doing you harm, God was actually setting you up for success. And when you trust Him and walk with Him, you will see the victory that He has already won for you. And so if you're going through any betrayal or going through any pain right now, take heart and understand that you have already won. And those who thought they had got you actually set you up for victory. Okay, so now Joseph is in prison. He's enjoying favor. He could have gotten comfortable there again. I mean, I don't know anyone who would want to be comfortable in prison, but he could have, because he was enjoying it. He was, I won't say enjoying it, but he was having favor with the prison guard. He, in fact, was even put in charge of all the rest of the other prisoners. And we see how Joseph's leadership qualities keep getting better and better, because wherever he finds himself, he's a leader. So now he's stuck in prison with these two guys, the chief butler and chief baker. They've been thrown into prison. I'm not sure why, but then they have a dream. And Joseph, I guess because of the process he had been through, had built so much empathy and had even become a dream interpreter, not just a dreamer. He talks to the chief butler and the baker and is like, what's troubling you guys? They had this dream, they couldn't interpret it, and they were so troubled by it. And then Joseph says, you know what, sit down, let me help you, because God is the one who gives the interpretation of dreams, just the way He gives dreams. And he ends up interpreting the chief butler and the chief baker's dreams. And just as he interpreted both their dreams, it came to pass. But before it even came to pass, he told the chief butler and the chief baker, you know, when this dream comes to pass, remember me. And you think that that would be the end of the process for Joseph. But the chief butler, who was restored to his position, forgot Joseph. He forgot Joseph. Gosh. In Genesis 40 verse 23, we see it says, yet the chief butler did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. And when I previously read this story, I used to think, oh, that's so unfair. Like, even when you feel like I've come to the end, I can see the light at the end of the tunnel, I'm still going through it. I've now been forgotten. Like, what's going on? And I feel like it's when we're getting closer to that breakthrough that things start to feel even worse. And I'm sure that Joseph must have felt like, who have I offended? What have I done? I thought I was coming to the end. I thought I was coming to the end. I'm coming out in freedom. But here I am 2 years on, because the chief butler forgot him for 2 years. But the power of this part of the forgetfulness of the butler that I really love, and the Holy Spirit was highlighting to me, is that if Joseph had been remembered by the chief butler immediately after the chief butler was restored to his position, at best, Joseph would probably have just been a porter in the kitchen. He could have been a kitchen staff, or maybe even assistant to the chief butler. And that is not what God intended for Joseph. God had a higher calling for him. And so the chief butler could not remember at the time that he should have remembered, if it was according to Joseph's plans and his will, because God needed it to happen at a specific time when Pharaoh himself will have a dream that only Joseph would be the one to interpret in the whole land. So we see that when God remembered Joseph, and not like God had ever forgotten, but it was a set time to favor him and remember him, is exactly when Joseph had this dream. And we see in Genesis 41 verse 14, says that Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him quickly out of the dungeon. So now Joseph's process is coming to an end. But I don't think that if I was Joseph, I don't think I would think, I'm going to become prime minister just from a dream interpretation. And so we're reading that in Genesis 14, verse 14, and seeing that Pharaoh brought him out quickly. And it's like the whole, was it 13 years? Because I think at 17 was when he was sold, and then he became prime minister of Egypt at 30. So for 13 years, this process has been going on. And now it says that he was brought out of prison. He was brought out of the dungeon quickly. So when that process comes to an end in your life, you begin to see that things are going to happen quickly. The same way it was happening for Joseph quickly is how it's going to happen for you. And then they quickly shave Joseph. They make sure he's clean. They make sure he's presentable to come before Pharaoh. How powerful, how beautiful, how amazing, how awesome is it that God made sure that Joseph was the only first of all, a prisoner, and then the foreigner, and the only person in the whole land who could interpret the dream of Pharaoh. And in this, God gets the glory. But even in God getting the glory, Joseph too was glorified. And so when we go through the process that God wants us to go through, when you've gone through that process and come out in the end, not only is God glorified, but he glorifies himself through you. And we see Joseph glorifying God and God glorifying himself through him. And so when Joseph stepped out of prison, he's not going as a chief butler, he's not going as a kitchen porter, he's not going as a slave or a servant in the government of Pharaoh. He's actually going into a governmental position. And this is my favorite part. Because it seems like all of this was just, why Joseph? Why did he have to go through all of this? And okay, yes, now he's now a government leader in Egypt. Because Joseph was rightly positioned to save the children of Israel many years down the line. And during the time of famine, he was able to keep his family and keep the lineage and the destiny and the covenant that God had for the children of Israel. And so we're going through this process, or you're going through this process and thinking, okay, I get to the end of it. God restores me. God gives me all the years that I lost. But I want you to know that it's not just for you. He has a purpose to which he has put you through this process and been with you and favored you, so that when you get to the other side of it, not only have you saved yourself, God has saved you, he saved your generations to come, and he has saved all the people who are attached to your calling. So that process that you're resenting, I want you to reframe your mind. I want you to renew your mind with everything that you've heard today, with everything that you've pondered on. When looking back at Joseph's story again, think, God has actually put me through this because he loves me, and he loves all the people that are attached to my calling. He has a great calling for me. And the reason why I'm going through this is so he can strengthen my faith, so he can strengthen my results, so he can build my character, so I can become that person that he has blessed and called me to be. And when you become that person, you don't falter, you don't waver, but you stand firm in your calling and in your destiny. So the process that you want to skip or you're resenting right now is the very thing that God is using to position you for destiny fulfillment. God is not punishing you. He's setting you up for a big success. He wants you to stay on the mountain. He wants you to get to the top and stay at the top. He has called us to dominate the world. He has called us to be fruitful and to multiply. But he wants you to be the right person to be able to do that, and at the right time. So don't despise this process, because when you come out on the other side, it will be absolutely worth the wait. So my prayer for you is that if you've gone through any process of betrayal or hurt that has left you brokenhearted and left you in a place where you don't feel like you trust God anymore, that my God will come, and your God will come and hug you and embrace you and pour his love out for you in a way that you will receive it, and he will heal you completely. I pray that you will walk with him in a new dimension of intimacy and trust him again, knowing that he has good plans for you. He has set you up for success. And though the process right now does not look like what he has called you into, you will come out on the other end and see that the process was worth it, and it was worth the wait. In Jesus' mighty name, amen. So my people, thank you so much for joining me again today on today's video. If you enjoy this, please comment. I would love to hear what exactly resonated with you and what else you would like to hear from me. Please like as well, because liking helps to push this video out to more people, and it really just encourages me to see your comments and your likes. Please subscribe and turn on the notification bell so that you get a notification each time I upload. There's going to be more vlogs coming as well, so I hope you enjoyed my last vlog. But yes, stay tuned with me. I love you guys.